Dear friends, it's day 901 of the unprovoked Russian invasion of Ukraine, and last week was rich in news and events, both tragic and inspiring. Russian strike on the Ukrainian mall in Konstantynivka, Ukrainian advance in Kursk with more than 1,000 Russian prisoners taken alive, intercepted Russian helicopter and jet, provocation at the Zaporizzhian nuclear power plant, and continuing Russian disinformation in the Western media. Let's talk about all this today in this video. Rescue operation in Konstantynivka was finished yesterday. 14 civilian bodies were identified, among them 3 girls aged 9, 11 and 16. Also 44 civilians were wounded as a result of the deliberate Russian strike on the Ukrainian mall. According to the United Nations report, over the past month, Russia killed the biggest number of civilians in Ukraine since October 2022. At least 219 Ukrainians died and 1,018 got wounded due to the Russian attacks on the civilian objects, which took place in July only. The unstoppable Ukrainian advance in the Russian Kursk Oblast keeps expanding. The Russian media acknowledged presence of the Ukrainian troops in Belovsky rayon of the Kursk Oblast, just south of Sudzha. Traditionally, they lied about the incurring troops being eliminated, but they were saying the same about Sudzha last week. The Ukrainian troops made plenty of footage roaming the Russian streets and capturing prisoners. According to the reports from different Ukrainian units, more than 1,000 Russian soldiers were taken alive. Among them, some valuable games, such as these 2 Kadyrovites, one of them wearing expensive suit from Stefano Ricci worth $2,300. As we can see, the gopnik culture among Chechen Kadyrovites is on a totally different level, which is really interesting to see, since Ukrainian military usually spend their money on combat equipment because we are at war. Probably it's because Kadyrovites think that military gear doesn't look sexy on camera. I don't really know how to comment this. Anyways, Ukrainian troops showcased a modern Russian tank T-80 BVM captured completely intact from the Russians in Kursk, together with ammunition and full tanks of fuel. Russians became known as the main source of the land-lease for the Ukrainian army since 2022. In 2023, approximately half of tanks in their possession were kindly donated to the Ukrainian defenders by the Russian war industry. Anticipating the Ukrainian advance on Kursk, Russians are building fortifications around Kurchatov nuclear power plant, which is confirmed by the recent satellite images. In the meantime, Russian sources report evacuation of more than 70,000 citizens from the frontline territories of Russia. Of course, they don't talk much about it in the media because it's really bad for the image and reputation of Vladimir Putin, also known around the world as Huilo. At the same time, pro-Russian collaborationist from Odessa, Igor Dmitriev, calls Russian citizens of Kursk to leave their homes because Russian army that is expected to liberate those territories will not make any difference between military and civilians, which is completely typical for the Russian war criminals. We all had a chance to see it ourselves. Some of the Russian activists called to help the internal refugees of Kursk, but their attempts failed and the activists were removed by the Russian police because, again, mentioning internal refugees in Russia is harmful for the Russian government, plus it is known fact that there is no freedom of speech in Russia. Both Ukrainian and Russian sources confirmed that a Russian Ka-52 attack helicopter and Su-34 bomber fighter were lost in combat. The crew on board of the helicopter became better, according to the Russian obituaries. As for the jet, the whereabouts of the crew remains unclear. In the meantime, Ukrainian-speaking people of Kursk are happy to see Ukrainian soldiers. As I mentioned before in some of my posts, one thing you will not see in Kursk is civilian mass graves like Russians did in Bucha or Izum, because Ukrainians are not Russians.
Не ображають.
Ви нас не довезете, ноги болять.
Та в нас
Та
якби
куди?
тут
У нас просто там амуніція, не маємо куди, чесно.
Ну ладно, потихеньку тоді підемо.
Так, але ви українською говорите.
Да, я хоч і не українка, але по-українськи, да.
Так що, слава Україні!
Так, слава.
It is truly a joy to see friendly Ukrainians in Kursk in good health and sober state of mind. Scrolling back to Ukraine, yesterday a thick cloud of smoke was noticed coming from the cooling tower of the Zaporizzhian nuclear power plant that is currently occupied by the Russian invaders. The most plausible version that we have nowadays is that the Russian invaders brought a bunch of old tires inside the cooling tower, set them on fire, and blamed Ukrainian troops of conducting a drone attack on the nuclear power plant. The cooling towers are used to cool down the water that is used in the reactors. However, all the reactors were shut down last year. This is why cooling towers were not in use for quite a while. Personally, I don't think that it was a Russian psyop. Apparently, some stupid Russian officer ordered to burn the tires for whatever reason a drunk Russian soldier could have, and later they came up with the brilliant idea of blaming Ukraine for a drone strike. Knowing Russians, I'm 90% convinced that this is exactly what happened there. Again, cooling towers in the closed power plant are completely harmless and cannot cause any harm to the environment other than this nasty smoke from the burnt tires, and Russians know it as well. Please make sure to check the report of the IAEA in the description. In the meantime, whole Russian society is really mad about losing a chunk of the Russian land to the Ukrainian troops, calling the international community to react. Apparently, they don't understand the international community will not really support the terrorist state, known for incessant violation of international law, conducting crimes against humanity, assassinations, terrorist acts, and global provision blackmail. Karma is a bitch, my friends, and in the end, criminal will always receive a proper reaction and punishment. With that, my friends, I wish you all a beautiful day. Please share your thoughts in the commentaries. I'm Operator Starsky, as always. Be safe.